one of our top salespeople one time, his previous job was a mattress salesperson before they came here. And then they did well in tech sales. One of our senior leaders sold steel before coming in here. And then he came in and has had an amazing career and done really, really well.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, which is built for revenue leaders who aren't afraid to say they're stuck and they need a real answer. I'm Karl, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of customers' success, not customer success, customers' success. Today's podcast is sponsored by the great team at Virtual Causeway. Imagine your sales team spending less time chasing and more time closing because buyers already know who you are before that first call. Well, that's exactly what Virtual Causeway does. They help B2B companies get found earlier in the buying process by the right people through the right channels that actually influence those decisions today. Well, the result is fewer cold calls, it's better conversations, and it's pipeline that moves faster. You can learn more about them by visiting virtualcauseway.com and make sure to mention the show for a special rate. Okay. Most companies treat recruiting as a department that feeds the business success. But my guest today will tell you, you probably got it backwards because recruiting isn't an upstream of the success. It's actually the first department to determine your own customer's success. It's just earlier in the pipeline. Now, my guest today is Mark Grimwood. Mark has spent almost 2 decades at Salesforce, building the idea from the inside. He started as a recruiter in corporate sales, and then he became a senior manager, and then a director, and then a senior director, until he landed a title that I've never seen, and you probably have never seen. VP of Recruiting for Global Customer Success. That's not a typo. Recruiting, and customer success, one job. Today, he's the SVP of Recruiting for Salesforce's entire global sales organization, which means he's deciding who gets on the team that sells the world's #1 CRM. And before any of that, he actually carried a bag himself in sales at SoftChoice, not an HR generalist grading resumes. He's somebody who carried a bag and is now hiring the people who carry theirs. So when he tells you what makes a hire stick, he's not theorizing. He's lived both sides of the desk. Mark has built peer interview programs, referral toolkits, and even text-based recruiting, the unglamorous tactical stuff that nobody puts in a LinkedIn post. While everyone else is debating culture fit in the abstract, he's the guy actually running the machine behind the scenes. Look, on top of all this, Mark's most important role is being a dad. Mark, welcome to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, and thank you for being here.
Awesome, Karl. Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. But thank you very much for having me on the show. Big fan of the show as well. So happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, hopefully I didn't say anything wrong, or you're like, where did you find that? All of my research was correct. So
yeah, no, you did a good job.
Nice. Let's get kicked off. And can you share with the audience obviously you're at Salesforce, but can you give us a little bit of context of your world? What industries, verticals you working in, selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, I manage Salesforce's global sales and distribution recruiting function. So that covers the globe. So we are all over the world hiring salespeople for our sales organization, covering everything from the small, medium-sized businesses all the way up to the large enterprise and everything in between. So we really cover the full gambit of customer size and the AEs that we're bringing in, supporting every single level along the way as well. So we sort of see that full dichotomy of these sales organizations.
Nice. And it is when you talk to Mark and you get to hear like he's hiring in all these different geographies and all these different verticals and all these different segments. I've got so many questions about how you look for fit and also the types of questions based on the role and the geography. Like there's lots I'm sure we can get into. But how we got today's topic is I asked Mark, like I ask everybody, what's a successful revenue initiative you've ever led or an existing challenge that you've either solved or solving today? And we had a really great chat, and the conversation led us to how does recruiting actually help to dictate your customers' success? And I was like, wait a second, what did you say, your customers? He's like, yes, the end customer, not our own customer success team, the end customer. So that was super interesting. if we jump off here and say, if I ask you this question, I know Salesforce is pushing AI agents really hard right now. Agentforce is really at the center of this. There's AI hiring tools, there's all kinds of things. From your perspective, what does AI still get wrong about spotting someone who's actually a great candidate? Or maybe I'll say it a different way. Where does AI get something? Where does AI get it wrong about somebody who will actually make your end customers successful?
Yeah, 100%. And AI is a great tool, and we're seeing the use cases increase every single day. It's actually amazing to see what the technology can do to make us more efficient, more effective in our roles. But it is still a tool, right? And it can be even a teammate in some cases with how you've built your agents. But there is a human in the loop, and that part is critical to success. So the way that we're looking at it is, what are the different workflows that are highly automatable that we can leverage AI to give our human team time back, right? To be focused on those more human centric aspects of the role. And that's evolving, right? So it starts with sort of that high volume, easier task scheduling and things like that aren't overly critical, but it's evolving very quickly into, what does it look like to have an AI agent that's actually conducting an interview? So we're seeing the technology evolve very quickly, but at the end of the day, the AI doesn't make that decision, right? It is a signal. It gives us direction, but if you don't have that human in the loop, you're going to make mistakes. There is going to be uh, things that go wrong that you could easily prevent, right? So just to give you a bit of an example, like there have definitely, and this happens with humans as well, right? I was sort of thinking as we were coming into this and thinking about sort of AI, because it is so prevalent. AI is going to look at it, and you ground that AI in what you're looking for, right? The thing about recruiting is it's so humanistic, right? Not everything about you, Karl, as a salesperson is in your resume, right? What makes you tick, how you even utilize, your sales training, and how do you run a sales process, and how do you run your discovery? People aren't listing that in their resume, right? And so yes, the agents can ask some questions. They can scan a resume and sort of give it a grade if you want that. It can even ask you some questions, but you also need that human in the loop to go that second and third layer deep. I think that's the part that can't be replaced, because you need the human in the loop to have those conversations, hear those cues, hear how the people are talking about it, and know where to take the conversation. Whereas the AI sort of has a structure, and it's going to follow its path, and it might be able to dig in here and there. But especially with something like recruiting, where you're dealing with humans, there are so many variables. And that's where you need a human on the other side to have that right conversation, to dig in to the cues that come up along the way as well.
I really like you said the human in loop, because it is super important, right? Like, how do you handle a process? And you look at it, I'm thinking about this I don't know if you've seen this. There's a video online right now where it's like the guy's talking with AI and said, cut the sandwich in half. Have you seen this one?
No.
So if I use sort of my mouse, it's like, hey, here's the sandwich, cut it in half. Right.
Right.
So as the sandwich is there, it's trying to go half. So top and bottom. So it's trying to slice
Right.
it between. It's like, no, that's not what I mean. I want you to cut it in half. So like spin it. So then it spins it and it's trying to cut it down like vertical. Like, no, that's not what I mean. Turn it. And then it turns it again and tries to go a different half. And you're like, okay, there's a great example. Like it's a little bit, it's funny. It also highlights the challenge with AI, because you can say, cut it in half. Great.
Right.
It's simple. But when you start to look at it, like, what are those clues? Can you pick it up in a sales conversation? I think that's one of the things with the human in recruiting is, when you ask somebody a question and they get really jittery, and how do they handle it? Or do they take a long time to respond? Or does it sound super robotic? Okay, that's not good things. Because if I've learned a little bit about you and the way that Salesforce operates, curiosity is at the highest part of the recruitment process, isn't it?
Right. 100%. And at least as of today, we're not selling to agents, right? We're selling to other humans. Our customers that we're dealing with are humans as well. We want to see what that interaction looks like. So during the interview process, yes, there is an agentic component to it, but there needs to be a human component to it as well, because that's what our people are doing. And we want to hear that curiosity. We want to see, especially now with how our technology is evolving and how our customer challenges are evolving. Our customers are buying in a completely different way. They are having challenges that are significantly different than what it looked like 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? They're trying to figure out how AI fits into their environment. They're trying to figure out how they can drive more efficiencies with probably less budgets, right, than what they would have had sort of pre-COVID, it feels like. They're still going through all of that. They need someone to help walk them through that. And they need someone to really understand their challenges. And that takes a human component to it, right? And so we want to be able to assess that up front, because that, like you mentioned, that curiosity piece and that ability to form those relationships is so critical, but it's very human, right? It's a human skill trait. And so that's why we need to be able to assess that up front as well.
Well, and hiring is one of the hardest things to do, like across the board, right? Like a dictation of what makes an employee successful and not. It can be, there's a lot of factors, right? Timing, territory, talent. Those are three things. Also, what leader are they going to be working with? Do they mesh? What is the product they're supporting? What about even the vertical they're going into, or the territory? There's components that come together. And Mark Roberge and John McMahon have a podcast together, and John talks about the hiring. And he said, look, like if you've got a 10% turnover of employees, it's actually a bad thing, because that tells me either you're not picking the right people and you're holding them on long enough, or you're not promoting, or et cetera. Like you have to have some level of turnover or some of experience. And I guess where I'm thinking about this is the hiring profile. And a lot of what you just said is there's AI that's happened to now. The traditional playbook is dead. It's gone. We're in a whole new world of trying to figure out, like you were just saying, what parts of the recruitment process can I leverage AI to have my higher value people work on higher value tasks? Right. And so when you start to go into, like, even from your process, how is the hiring profile and the things you're looking for changed today for your own customers and your end customer success?
Yeah, 100%. And so one of the things that we've been working on is sort of the holy grail around recruiting is quality of hire, right? And it can be defined in a lot of different ways. Every company that is evaluating quality of hire evaluates it in a different way. And in my opinion, it's even less about having the end destination of like a quality of hire metric. It's more that journey of assessing what does it take to be successful within your organization, right? And that's sort of what you're touching on. And that is definitely evolving. So I would say, like, when I look back at the almost 17 years that I've been here at Salesforce, curiosity has sort of always been there. But I think it's even more at the forefront now when it's also combined with really navigating ambiguity and really being able to work in that gray space is really important, because that's what our customers are dealing with, right? Like now, when you talk like enterprise organizations, they might have a bigger blueprint of where they want to go and their tech stack and their vision. And there's still a lot of ambiguity within all of that as well. But when you start to talk about mid-market and SMB customers that are driving their revenues and looking to sustain growth while also bringing in these AI tools and thinking about what that future looks like, that is a very different profile of an account executive that can go into these customers and understand that and help guide them through that. Because a lot of what we're trying to do is see around corners, right? Like we don't 100%. Know exactly what these next 3 years look like, because the pace of change is just so fast right now. And so you need people that can manage that. And that's not for everybody, right? And I think that that's another important piece that for any sales organization and anyone, any of your listeners that are building sales organizations, it's almost as important to know what you are looking for and what you're not looking for and have that clarity, because it is so important to bring in the right people, but you're not going to get it 100% either, right? It's a great call out. You're going to have attrition within your organization. That just happens. but are you anchoring on directionally where you want to go as an organization? And are you evaluating that so that you can iterate on it? So if you're saying, hey, our top 3 skills are, we need curiosity, we need really strong prospecting skills, let's say, and then we need really strong account development. People need to really be able to develop an account. Great. But don't just set it and forget it, right? Your customer's business is changing too much. How we sell is changing too rapidly to be like, we're going to keep that for the next 5 years. You have to be going back and evaluating, hey, these are the skills we're assessing for today because we think it's right. Now, what does the data tell us as we track these individuals once we've hired them through their onboarding, through their first year, through their first 3 years? How are they doing against quota attainment? Obviously is number one thing that we look at, but what are the other KPIs that tell you what success looks like for your AEs? And then bring that back into the hiring process. And like, are the skills and competencies that you're assessing for leading to those outputs you're looking for? That's that quality equation that we're trying to solve for as well.
I really like you call that out. I had Mike Lamb from Mitel. He's leading the AI revolution for Mitel, and he and I had a really deep conversation about, are enterprises actually ready for selecting one AI tool today? And it was an interesting conversation,
Right.
And I think it's a real conversation it's hard to pick right now. When you think of everything we've talked about, right? If you went back 12 months ago, Claude Anthropic wasn't part of the discussion. Everything was ChatGPT.
Right.
Now you've got Perplexity, you've got Claude, you've got ChatGPT is still around, but you have Gemini came out of quote unquote nowhere, right? And then you've got Microsoft with their Copilot. There's changes happening so fast that how quickly can you pick one? And then if you pick one, how long are you going to stick with it? And I think I'd like to tie 2 things together, because I really like what you said. Like that whole AI tech stack, that's changing. So anybody that's now in a role today, you can go, hey, we're going to go with this tool. Great. How long? Oh, hey, a quarter later, you know what? That didn't go. We're going to go with another one. So now as an account executive going, okay, we had these workflows. We connected these dots, a new tool that's going to do this thing. How does it change? What is the tech stack? How do we have to iterate? Hey, by the way, back to the Salesforce world of, this is a new emerging technology that maybe we didn't know. How does it tie into our APIs and our endpoints? And what are the things we can do? So there's a technical skill set, I think, that's likely jumped to the front. So I'm going to tie 2 things together.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk more, like get more of insight of the quality hire, but I'll ask a question underneath of that first. The speed to evaluating. When you've gone into this, like as you're going through it, what does that look like for you now? How often are you looking back to your questions or even your processes or even the skills you're asking from the candidate? Is it a quarterly thing? Is it a monthly thing? Is it a weekly thing? Like, how are you assessing it, and how fast are you trying to iterate on those?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a little bit of both, right? It's not because I would say like we're doing a deep dive. It feels like annual, where we really sort of dig in and dive into it. But we are also looking on a quarterly basis just at some of the data inputs and see the trends that are happening around, hey, here are the skills and competencies that we've built out and the level for each skill and competency depending on the role, right? So we have a whole matrix for every single account executive role. Like you sort of mentioned at the kickoff, the skills that you need for an SMB AE and an enterprise AE, they might actually be very similar skills. You just need a different level of expertise in each of those skills and competencies depending on the role. So we sort of have all of that mapped out, and then we're checking to see how are we actually scoring people during the interview process against then how are they doing during their onboarding in their first 3, 6, 12 months. And, you know what I mean? And then we're sort of always going back to that, and we have dashboards that allow us just to sort of see the trends. We don't need it on a per person basis because it's the purpose of it isn't to look at one individual. The idea is to say, are these skills and competencies that we are anchoring on leading to the success that we want? Yes or no? And sometimes the data is really clear. Sometimes it's not, right? It's not a perfect science. but that's what's trying to guide us to make some more of those right decisions.
It makes a lot of sense to me as you said it, because it goes back and like it sounds like you're doing almost a cohort level analysis. Hey, in the month of July 2025, for sake of discussion,
Sure.
the cohort we hired, how are they doing? Oh, you know what? We're seeing clues. And I'm guessing, and I say this with a level of understanding of the sophistication and the skills and the tool sets that Salesforce has. Like, it's not going to be across, but I'm guessing there's probably something where it's like this cohort, we saw these things happen, we saw these people do really well, these are the types of questions we asked, we now there's the success. Okay, we can do a little bit of an analysis of saying the top 10, the bottom 10, and then the majority. What are the questions? Okay, let's start to adjust. And where can AI take into some of those? Like, how can we pick up the clues that we saw? Oh, you know what? Our gut feel on that person or these types of people, we saw these things. So I'm guessing there's something there, which goes back to that quality of hire. And how would you define quality of hire? Like, for somebody thinking about this going, oh, I never even thought about quality of hire, Mark. Well, that's a new term for me. How would you have them think about that?
Well, even, and let me just talk to the first point you made there, and then I'll come back to quality of hire because I can talk about quality of hire forever. But where AI really helps is getting us access to the data and the signals quickly. What we do with those signals and that data, that is still human in the loop in the decision making, right? And critical thinking. I think critical thinking is going to be, if not the top skill set of the next 5 years, it's going to be very close, because we're going to all have access to a lot of the same data, like you mentioned before. There's all these different LLMs. The access to data, in my opinion, is going to be very democratized. We all have access to it. Mm-hmm. What are you doing with it? And that critical thinking, and how do you partner with your LLMs and your agents and all of that to make business decisions? That is the crux of what these next few years is going to look like. So I think that's an important just call out. When you start thinking about quality of hire, like I mentioned, every organization looks at it a little bit differently. For us, we have really anchored it to, we want to see, and there's different measurements, but one of the ones that I really like is time to value of an account executive. Like, how quickly can we help get them ramped up, right? And that's not just a pure recruiting metric by any means, but like you mentioned on the kickoff, we're at the forefront of that, right? We are from almost like the inspired to hire stage, we sort of cover all of that. And we want to make sure that the people that we're going out and attracting and that we're talking to are the ones that are going to be set up for success, that can come in and hit all those KPIs and those metrics, but ultimately that can drive success within our customers' business. Like, that's what we're here for. And you sort of mentioned it at the beginning as well, but what really kicked off our conversation is, yes, it's important to make hires and build your organization and grow, but the way that you get there is through your customers being successful. Mm-hmm. And the number one driver, I would say, of your customers being successful, even more potentially, and I'm a little biased because I'm in recruiting, even more than your product, are the people that are working with your customers, right? You can have a great product, but if you don't understand your customers' pain points and their challenges and how you can actually solve those problems, then it doesn't matter how good the product is, right? Because it's not going to get implemented right. They're not going to be able to get the ROI that they need to stay on as a customer and to achieve all the things that they want to achieve. And that starts with having the right people, asking the right questions, being able to find those right connections between what your organization can bring and what the customer needs. And to me, again, I might be overthinking it because, I live in this world, but I'm like, that starts in those very first conversations about the people that you're bringing into your organization. So that's sort of how we start thinking. That's the big picture quality of hire, of like what we're trying to achieve, of how do we just get more people into the organization that have the right skills and competencies and behaviors and all those components that are going to drive those metrics to help our customers be as successful as possible.
So one thing you just said, and I don't know that I've asked this question before, and hopefully I'm okay. You're okay with me asking this.
Always.
Recruiting starting at the very forefront is recruitment really is the very first salesperson for the company. right? Like it's the experience of candidate. And when you start talking about quality of hire, is there a relationship, or how do you look at this from the Salesforce perspective, or even your own team, from an enablement to recruitment? I don't know that I've ever asked it from a salesperson, sales enablement, customer enablement, etc. It's so important. I don't
Agreed.
know that I've ever asked a recruiting leader or even somebody like yourself, how does sales enablement or recruitment enablement, whatever that title is, actually influence your team?
Yeah, and that's changed a lot, I'd say, in the last 3 years that we've gotten really close with our sales enablement team. I was sort of half joking the other day as on a customer meeting, talking with one of our customers about their HR processes and their recruiting processes. And I said, when you think about sort of recruiting and enablement and onboarding, it's sort of like the synergies between marketing and sales that you can get sometimes. When sales are down, the salespeople are like, well, the marketing leads are terrible. We're not getting any good marketing leads. And marketing's like, wow, we're sending good leads, but sales isn't closing them, right?
Yeah.
Same thing sort of goes with hiring. Like when the hiring numbers are down, you're not growing fast enough, or you're not seeing the achievement out of your new hires. It's, well, did we hire the right people? Is that recruiting's fault? Or we brought in the right people, but we didn't onboard and enable them fast enough. So that was sort of one of those silos that were like, all right, we need to break this down. And it really is that continuum from the time that they start to the time that they're successful. We're all in this together, right? We all have the same goal of making our new hires as successful as possible to help our customers. So we've worked really closely with them on what their initiatives are. How are they measuring success, and how are they training and onboarding people, and what are the skills that they think are trainable that they want to take on during that period, and what do they need from people coming in the door? We have a lens on that based on what we think and what our hiring managers think. But there is that third component in the story of, we're going to put people through some incredible training. So do they need all those skills up front the day they walk in the door, or are we going to train them on it?
Right.
The more clarity you have on that, it allows you to open your aperture to the types of candidates that you're willing and able to bring into the organization. And I think that, and again, that's just as we're talking AI, that's another differentiator that our recruiters have versus some of the agents that might be evaluating a resume or having a conversation. That knowledge around where is their flexibility based on what we know is also available to our new hires within the organization.
I almost see this as like, if I could draw it on the screen, it almost seems like right now what you've said is like recruiting, you're going to hand it off to sales enablement hands it back to the sales team, and then the sales team is going back to your team, to the recruitment team, saying, good fit, not good fit. And then is that sort of like a consistent circle or cycle to say, oh, you know what, oh, I hired Karl. We hired Karl. He was really good. Oh, he's struggling in these areas. Hey, let me connect to sales enablement to say, hey, I heard from the sales leader that he's struggling in this area. Okay, enablement, can you take something on and help him? Like I don't know if that isn't a thing that exists, but it almost seems like it landed for me just as you're talking.
I think that's the progression naturally. I think what doesn't happen a lot is the loop back and the consolidation of all of it, right? Recruiting handles new hires, onboarding or brings people in the door. Enablement and onboarding handles them once they come in for those, that first year in conjunction with the business, of course. And then the sales leaders have them the rest of the way. Where we're trying to sort of insert ourselves to help drive this, and I think it's an opportunity for talent acquisition teams to help close that loop, is partnering with enablement, partnering with the business, and being like, what does that full year loop look like? And we are anchoring at the 1 year mark, but you could extend that out, however long you wanted to. Because I do think that tie back is super valuable, because what you don't want to do, and what most organizations do, they only look at it once you get to the attrition point. You're doing an autopsy, right? Of what went wrong. That doesn't help you in the moment, right? The attrition's already happened, and depends on how bad the situation is. That attrition could spike pretty quickly because of other things that are broken in the chain leading up to it. Whereas if you have an ongoing feedback loop, it allows you to just navigate those waters in a different way and be a bit more proactive into, hey, what are you seeing that's working versus not working? It also allows you, in some situations, depending on the organization, you might have brought the right person in, they might be in the wrong role.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does that idea of redeployment within your organization look like, where you have a really strong individual that, maybe after a year, 18 months, 2 years, they have that institutional knowledge within your organization. They're a culture carrier, but they're just not in the right role, but they could be a fit somewhere else. That's sort of what happened with me when I started my career. I was in sales for, a year or so doing tech sales. Not really that great at it. I did okay, but I struggled. That wasn't, where my skills and competencies, best aligned. But then they opened up a recruiting role, recruiting for that exact role that I was doing. And I made that switch, and I was much stronger on selling the company and the role. So it's like, I loved the company. And so I was the right fit in the organization, wrong fit for that job. And we're able to pivot and move on that, right? I think that sort of sits in the back of my head as an example of the benefit that you can have when you close that loop early.
There's actually somebody who I think about. There's a couple people actually, but I think we know him well, Eric DeMille, who I got to work with. I was on the same team, and he was doing so well, and it was like, hey, actually, he moved from the sales side to the sales enablement side, and was helping to build that, and like, it was a whole different world. But it allowed him not only from a growth, because it goes back to your comment, like the redeployment, and I don't know that I've heard that term used with other HR leaders, like, hey, what's our redeployment number look like? And I don't even know if that's a metric of like, because internal growth is important, right? And it goes back to that conversation about the hiring number. If you have a 20% churn, like if you have a 20% churn, that might actually be a really good thing, because 17% of that is internal mobility, and maybe only 3% didn't make it for whatever reason, or you look at it a little bit however you want to look at it. But that redeployment of how do you take your best people, allow them to move inside your organization to make not only your company like better, their culture carriers, all these other things. I really like you said that. I know we're going to run out of time pretty quickly, but if we try to tie all this back, there's sort of an underlying question that I'd like to ask you, and hopefully it's okay. We talked about customers' success and hiring. Is there also a correlation between hiring and customer churn?
That's interesting. I haven't seen that data. I don't think that's something that we've necessarily looked into, but that's a really interesting question. And I think that would depend on your organization, right? And the size of your organization. It's interesting. I would hope it's not too tied to churn, right? If your organization brand is strong enough, and the resources, and you're aware enough of what's going on with your customers, that if it goes to a red account, that you're swarming it and helping to help those customers out and figure out what those problems are, that can maybe help save it. But if you're in a situation where you are purely dependent on a one-to-one relationship between your AE and the customer in order to maintain that customer, then that risk level would go up, that hiring the wrong person, not only is it going to cost you time and dollars to backfill them and rebuild relationships, but to actually lose a customer because of those people, like, I'm sure there's organizations that feel that pain. That's not something that we've sort of looked into that detail around.
Which is totally fair. And like I said, I've never asked it, but just as we're talking, because it's like quality of hire. And like you said, like, as you're talking through it, I'm like, okay, is there any correlation between, look, we put Karl into the role, and he's got red accounts, and it's just constantly, we're swarming.
Right.
Is that a higher thing, or is it like an account thing, or is it just like timing, territory, talent, right? Like, is it one of the T's that we put him into a role, and on paper it could look like, oh, terrible hire, but under the surface you go, hold on a second, we handed him 10 terrible accounts that we need to maintain, and he's in firefighting mode the whole time. Like, we actually need to help him more. because he is a good hire. Or the flip side is like, we put Karl in it and he's killed 10 accounts that is
Right.
translating to 100 billion in revenue. Like, okay, let's get him out of here and put somebody else in, because again, the quality higher, the skill sets, and the customer's success. Because at the end of the day, if your customers are happy, they're renewing, you're in a good spot.
100%. Well, and how I'm hearing this and what I'm thinking about as you're talking through that, because again, it's not something I've ever even thought of actually. This is exactly where companies can leverage their talent acquisition teams, right? Like there's so much on the plate of sales leaders, right? They have so many things that they're looking at. They need partners that are going to help look into their challenges internally. And for me, like, I would love to dig into that conversation, right? Like, me,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I'd love to look into that and see if there is a correlation between red accounts and, lost deals and account executives, and that not just the individual, but the skill sets of that individual.
Mhm.
Because yes, you might hire someone that doesn't end up fitting in as a bad fit. Like, that's going to happen because, again, we're dealing with humans. There's so much variability there.
Right.
But was it a bad hire because of the individual or because of the profile that we hired? And I think that's an incredibly important distinction. We had a former sales leader here when we were looking at removing education requirements from some of our roles, where we're like, hey, if they have experience, like if they haven't completed a university degree, it's like, that might be okay. And he said, yeah, go try it, but stay close to it and tell me if it works or not. He's like, you have a couple silver bullets to go play around with here. Yeah. And what we found is that, like, the profile didn't require a university degree for the role that we were talking about. Now, an individual might come in that either has a degree or doesn't and not work out, but that doesn't mean you just throw all of that profile out because of one or two bad apples. So you just have to really assess, is it an individual problem or is it a profile problem? And again, this is where recruiting has data and insights and interview feedback that you can sort of tie into this to make it a data related question and answer, rather than just like a gut feel of, oh, I didn't like this person, they had this background, I'm never hiring that background again. Yeah. That might be the right thing, but like, base it on data, don't base it on gut instinct, right? And that just takes some work around building that out a little bit.
Yeah, because relevancy and recency are two totally connected things, and sometimes they get in our own way, right? And the other thing too that I had to learn afterwards is, like, are they high context or low context? And what's the society and the type of person we put there, and did it just not match there? Like, the education's a great call out. Just because we're going to be going into the healthcare, or as an example, we're going to hire somebody going into the healthcare vertical. Do they have to work in healthcare, or can I teach them that skill set because they've worked at other organizations that are, and it's an enterprise example, a lot of enterprise experience, we'll teach them the healthcare stuff. Or, hey, we looked for the background of healthcare, we put them in the role, turns out their sales skills and the skill sets we need to actually do the role didn't align. So was it a skill set or was it an education question? And let's go back and look, well, hey, who's our best performers? Like, that's where the data can really start to inform. And I think even like your point about the AI side of things, that's where you can go, hey, all the people we've hired, et cetera, like, you can start to pull that analysis pretty quickly, where a year ago, it probably took you a month to try to go through that.
Exactly. And like, just about the profile again, I know we are coming up on time, but we have some historic stories that have been passed down that we all where it's like, we've hired, I remember one of our top salespeople one time, his previous job was a mattress salesperson before they came here, and then they did well in tech sales. One of our senior leaders sold steel before coming in here, and then he came in and has had an amazing career and done really, really well. And so that's not the majority, right? The majority, there is still a profile that says, the majority come from some sort of technical sales background and have been in IT in some space, 100%. But the idea is, the more you understand your profile, your skills, your competencies, you start thinking about what actually drives that quality of hire within your organization. It allows you to like I said before, open that aperture of who you're bringing in, and AI is going to help you get there, but then you need the humans to do that last 20, 30%, especially to make sure you're finding the right profiles and bringing people in.
Yeah, I think it's a really great call out. And I was sharing with Mark before when John Barrows was on. I think John was on like a year ago at this point, and he said, "Hey, look, AI is cool, but it's the Jarvis, right? Like Iron Man suit.
100%.
Iron Man was the suit; it was just the suit. But once Jarvis became the AI and the human working together, that's when Iron Man really started to fly, basically, right?
Nope.
Like and so I think that's a core component here of making sure you're looking at it and don't just trust the first output from AI. Go, let me
Oh,
just question it. What
yeah.
are you sure? Like, let me show me the data points and what I should be looking at. Because there's some things like, what are the obvious and non-obvious insights that I should be looking at? Like, ask it as a thought partner. Don't trust the output right out of the gate.
What we've always done, right? Anytime we've gotten data historically, right? Even pre AI, you know what I mean? Like anytime you as a sales leader had data come in, you would look at it with a critical eye,
Yeah.
right? I think AI has started to train us to think that it has all the answers right away and we don't have to have that critical thinking. And I think that's where you sort of get caught. But it's the critical thinking on top of it that is going to allow you to speed up your decision making. It's going to give you a ton of benefits, but don't skip over the critical thinking, or else you're going to run into a lot of issues.
I totally agree with you. Okay, let's try to get you out of here, Mark, because I think we could talk for hours. I like to ask everybody at the end of the episode. Everybody likes new and nobody likes different. And when you do both at the same time, it can either cause friction or uncertainty. So for somebody thinking about leveling up their hiring process for their end customer success, what are 2 or 3 actionable things you would suggest for them to do on Monday morning so that they can improve?
I think the first place I would start basic, right? For a sales organization, if you haven't done this, take a look at your top 20% of your salespeople today. And what are the core themes, skills, competencies that those individuals have? And really zero in on what that profile looks like. Because if you haven't done that in even the last 2 years, let's say, that could have changed. Like, what are they doing that is making them successful? And like, spend the time on that profile because it is just evolving so quickly. And your top performers are seen around the corner in some way, right? Because they're staying up to date with what is going on within your customer base. So they're doing something a little different. Now you want to try and bottle that and package that so that now when you're bringing people in, you're sort of putting them through that lens of what your top performers are doing. So that would definitely be number one. Not even technology related or AI related. It's just like really understanding what success for your organization looks like, I think is an absolute baseline. Because then sort of part 2 would be start experimenting with tools, right? You had sort of talked about, hey, is there one AI that you could use? I don't see any need for that, right? Like I want access to all these different tools because they all have different strengths. How do you build in that stack? And, shameless plug for Salesforce. One of the things that we've now pivoted to that I think is really changing how we support our customers is having that headless feature where it's like, yes, we can be your front facing UI, but then like behind it, we're going to use all the different technologies to support that, right? So, but you got to start testing and experimenting and failing fast on what works to drive that productivity and really enhance your human capacity, because that's what it's going to do. It's not going to replace your human capacity. It's going to enhance it and drive that productivity out.
I think 2 really great things. One, you don't have to spend any money on, just look internally and see, hey, what are the top people doing that are better? And then look for those skills for your next hires. It's an easy one. The experimentation with tools, I think, is really the most important thing, especially now. Try something. You can sign up now for like a month for something. It might cost you 20 to $100, whatever the case is, but experiment with it, right? Like get some information. What are the things you're not seeing and does it help you? If it helps you, great, do more of it. If it doesn't, shut it off. Like move on. But this has been a lot of fun, Mark. And for somebody that's listened, they say, hey, I'd like to connect with Mark. Like, where would you suggest they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. That's where I'm connecting with people in the industry, and I love this conversation, right? So don't ever hesitate to reach out if any of your listeners have questions or want to talk about this stuff. Like you said, we could easily go another hour or two here, so I can talk about this stuff all day. But really appreciate you having me on here. I think just the whole purpose of your podcast really resonates around solving the problems that are in the revenue space, and that sales organizations have just incredible amounts of challenges in front of them, and ambiguity, and it's all changing so fast, but they're also on the front line of driving success within companies. Like, that's the driver of success. So it's a really exciting time, but we all are learning together as we move forward here, for sure.
I totally agree with you. The learning, the pace of change is it's faster now than it's ever been. And it's been unbelievable. So, but before we go, Mark, it's been amazing for me personally to watch your growth. Like, Mark actually recruited me back when I was at BlackBerry years back, and I was like, what is this thing? But it's the experience that I remember, and I've stayed in touch with Mark all these years later. So thank you for that. But it's for somebody who's thinking about, hey, how do we create a candidate experience? Like, you nailed that, because if you go back, like we're going back, what, almost 15 years or something. And I remember that experience because of what you've done. So I've appreciated that. I've learned a lot from you on recruiting, also business. Like, this conversation probably highlights it. I appreciate all the chats. And when I do connect, you don't hesitate to respond. And I think the friendship is something that I value the most. So thank you for doing this today. And I appreciate you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Karl. Same to you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. I want to thank Mark for sharing these incredibly invaluable insights, and there's some strategy you can put into action today. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need that right conversation to find it. Thank you for investing your time with us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.